to imagine yourself sitting with a group of individuals, whether it's with your team or your family or with your friends, and you are asked this question. Is it easier to determine the similarities amongst all of you, or is it easier to determine the differences among all of you within this group? Can you answer that question or those questions quickly? Can you answer them in depth? Are you willing to answer those questions, or is there a reticence in your response? The topics for this week are twofold, one being followership, but the other being diversity in leadership, but we're looking at it also through the lens of followership. I want us to start with this recognition that diversity is more than skin color or ethnicity. I think we get hung up there. And while that is one aspect of diversity, that is only one aspect. Skin color is only 1/16 inch deep. So I want us to recognize that when we think about that, we can think about age or gender or socioeconomic backgrounds, our political backgrounds, our educational backgrounds, our denominational backgrounds, our families, our religion, our worship styles. There's learning styles, careers. That reality, when you hear the word diversity, I hope that all of those and more, those thoughts come into your mind. I want to generate a broad and a wide bandwidth in you that continually is stretched. And so as you read and observe and absorb this week's information, I want you to do that with an open mind. I want you to look at this topic of diversity as exciting and as broad, and I don't want it to be a one lens or a one-size-fits-all kind of thinking. You see a book cover titled Building the House for Diversity. This is an excellent book that I discovered several years ago. The content is invaluable. Another thing that I like about this book is there is an assessment in there that allows a pre-test and a post-test. One that you take before you ever read the book and kind of absorb all the information. But then once you've done everything that the book, and it takes a while to read because there's all kinds of activities in it, then at the end of that you take the assessment again to do that pre and post-test to explore your attitude and or your bias and or your thoughts or perspectives towards diversity. The book starts with a fable, and it's a story about a giraffe and an elephant. And the giraffe and the elephant are friends. They live in the same neighborhood. They have children that go to school together. They're on PTA together. They have the same hobby of woodworking, so they have a lot of things in common. And so one day, the giraffe invites the elephant over to his house, and it's not until the elephant is invited into the house of the giraffe do they start finding many of their differences. And as they work through those, the story concludes with the giraffe lamenting, saying, "I'm not sure a house built for a giraffe is meant for an elephant." And basically what it is saying, it is telling us that we all have different lenses through which we perceive our everyday experiences. And in light of that, we come to our conclusions of whether we can be together or not. On the document or on your screen, you see two definitions taken from that book, and I really appreciate these definitions. The first one is how diversity is defined. Diversity is defined as any collective mixture with similarities and differences. Any collective mixture with similarities and differences. And here's the reality. If you were to ask this as I started out this segment, can you identify the similarities amongst you? Can you identify the differences amongst you? Which would be easier to do? Because whenever the word diversity comes up, the majority of the time, we equate that with differentness. And I want us to move forward from this point, recognizing that when the word diversity comes up, we start with how are we alike? And yes, how are we different as well? We then recognize that there's something called diversity maturity. And diversity maturity is defined as the total collective mixture of individuals who have similarities and differences, but, and here's the qualifier, we're looking at each other from a two-way perspective. In other words, we are saying that there is more than one way to look at this. My way is one way, your way is another. But many times we are hesitant or we are just totally ignorant to the fact that there might be another perspective there. And recognize that with any combination or total combination like that, if one person is different in anything, there is a differentness. And yet your place of commonality may be that you are all in this place at the very same time. So with these definitions in mind, I want you to enjoy, it's kind of a silly, but it's a poignant video on the peacock in a land of penguins, because it just helps expand this a little bit more to identify and understand and appreciate diversity, both similarity and difference. And the power of the lens through which we choose to look really impacts how we lead and how we follow. I want to read from you from 1 Corinthians, starting with verse 14, chapter 12, out of the Message, about what the picture of a body looks like. And if we move this into the realm of leading and following and the topic of diversity, how powerful this is. I want you to think about how all this makes you more significant, not less. A body isn't just a single part blown up into something huge. It's all the different but similar parts arranged and functioning together. If foot said, "I'm not elegant like hand, embellished with rings. I guess I don't belong to this body," would that make it so? If ear said, "I'm not beautiful like eye, limpid and expressive. I don't deserve a place on the head," would you want to remove it from the body? If the body was all eye, how could it hear? If all ear, how could it smell? As it is, we see that God has carefully placed each part of the body right where He wanted it. But I also want you to think about how this keeps your significance from getting blown up into self-importance. For no matter how significant you are, it is only because of what you are a part of. An enormous eye or a gigantic hand wouldn't be a body, but a monster. What we have is one body with many parts, each its proper size and in its proper place. No part on its own is more important. Can you imagine eye telling hand, "Get lost, I don't need you," or head telling foot, "You're fired, your job has been phased out"? As a matter of fact, in practice it works the other way. The lower the part, the more basic, and therefore necessary. You can live without an eye, for instance, but not without a stomach. When it's a part of your own body you are concerned with, it makes no difference whether the part is visible or clothed, higher or lower. You give it dignity and honor just as it is, without comparisons. If anything, you have more concern for the lower parts than the higher. If you had to choose, wouldn't you prefer good digestion to full-bodied hair? The way God designed our bodies is a model for understanding our lives together, every part dependent on every other part, the parts we mention and the parts we don't, the parts we see and the parts we don't. If one part hurts, every other part is involved in the hurt and in the healing. If one part flourishes, every other part enters into the exuberance. I think that passage just pops in both the challenge and the understanding of what it means to live in a diverse world with similarities and differences. We get to choose. We get to choose. And that becomes the crucial part of all of that. John Maxwell summarizes these verses by saying, "Leaders must build a team spirit that celebrates diversity. Teams must share a common goal, but not the same gifts. Teams mature when the leader insists on diversity, similarities and differences, and celebrates what everyone does together." Former UCLA basketball coach John Wooden said, "Individuals win trophies. Teams win championships." I have two books sitting on my shelves at home. They sit side by side. One is called Working With You is Killing Me. I bought that book because I didn't even know what it was about, but the title jumped out at me when I was walking through Barnes & Noble. But the other one is The Power of Two. That book is all about resilient alliances. How do we build those resilient alliances? And basically, the first one, even though it has such a negative title, is about the same thing. We don't want to kill each other. We want to work well together. We want to build those strategic alliances and partnerships. And the way we do that is looking through the lenses that we wear. Depending upon if you wear glasses or contacts, I do. And I have multiple prescriptions depending upon if I have contacts in, I have monovision, I have progressive lenses. And depending upon what I want to see at what point in time and where I am, I have to put on the right prescription. And the same is true in our perspective on how we engage in this place called diversity. Developing a leadership culture with understanding and appreciation is the responsibility of everyone. And I firmly believe that to create an organizational culture environment that works and values, engages all, requires all of us to be intentionally involved in that, finding our voices, being able to articulate our voices, our perspectives, but keeping that open mind, that broader mind that allows us to receive as well, so that we come to that initial recognition that leadership is leaders and followers working together toward the shared outcome or the shared goal.